Hello, my name's Lenora. At my own niece's wedding, I was seated near the kitchen, left off the guest list, and mistaken for the help. They said it was an oversight, just a mix-up. But was it? My sister and her in-laws smiled in public, while slowly erasing me behind the scenes. The gifts I paid for were credited to them. My speech, cut, my seat, hidden. I stayed quiet, until one phone call changed everything. But what did I say? And why did the entire wedding come to a stop? The humidity hit me the moment I stepped out of the car. Charleston summers didn't care about weddings or makeup. They melted everything evenly. I pulled at the side of my simple navy blue dress, trying to smooth the wrinkles that had formed during the drive. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and modest, and more importantly, it was what I could afford. St. Augustine Manor stood like a cathedral to Southern wealth. Marble steps, white columns, and enough floral arrangements to make a florist cry. I paused at the base of the stairs, watching guests in chiffon and linen glide past with practiced ease. No one looked at me. I wasn't expecting them to. Inside, the lobby shimmered with crystal light. My heels made the smallest sound on the polished floor. When I reached the check-in table, a young woman in a black blazer offered a plastic smile. "Name, please?" I gave it calmly. "Lenora Shipman. I'm the bride's aunt, Danessa's sister." Her fingers paused over the iPad, then tapped again. "I'm sorry, I don't see you on the list. Are you sure the RSVP was confirmed?" My mouth stayed still. My jaw didn't. "I was told everything was handled weeks ago." She offered an apologetic look that didn't reach her eyes. "Let me check with someone." The assistant stepped away with the kind of urgency people reserve for spilled drinks. A minute later, she returned. "They said it must have been left out in the update. You're welcome to take any of the remaining open seats." "Any?" I blinked. "Of course," she said quickly. "Let me show you." She didn't lead me through the ballroom's main aisle. Instead, we skirted the edge, past clusters of guests sipping mimosas and exchanging inside jokes. She stopped near the kitchen corridor. A small, round table sat in partial shadow between the swinging kitchen doors and a stacked tray cart. "Here we are," she said, gesturing to the seat. The place card read, "Overflow Table 4. No name. I sat, smiled thinly, thanked her. She walked away. From my seat, I had a direct view of the kitchen doors swinging open and shut every 30 seconds. Waitstaff moved in and out like ghosts. The smell of roasted vegetables wafted through, strong and sharp. A tall man nearby was talking about summering in Maine. A woman beside him mentioned flying her decorator in from New York. They didn't glance my way. I didn't blame them. I adjusted my posture, checked my phone with fake interest, and folded my hands in my lap. My seat creaked slightly as I shifted. Maybe it really was a clerical error. These things happened, right? Oversights. The kind that no one meant personally. Maybe. From across the room, I saw Danessa. Her blonde hair was pinned in a French twist, her pearl earrings catching the light. She laughed at something the groom's father said, fingers grazing the stem of her champagne flute. She hadn't seen me. Or maybe she had. A waiter walked past, offering glasses of champagne. He skipped my table. I looked at the centerpiece in the middle of the table. It was a tall glass cylinder, with hydrangeas and lilies, very close to the arrangement I'd suggested in a long email last year. The one she never replied to. Still, there it was. Slightly different, just enough to deny credit. I remembered helping her months ago, quietly wiring funds into her account when the florist deposits were due. She was tight until payday, and I didn't ask questions. I never did. I stared at the untouched glass of water in front of me and told myself I was fine. Behind me, two women whispered as they passed. They said there was a family member who might show up. Uninvited. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The tone behind that whisper was enough. I knew what they thought. Instead, I stood up slowly, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked toward the side of the room where most of the guests had started to gather with drinks. I wasn't thirsty, but I figured blending in was better than looking like a woman banished to a corner. Maybe if I moved, I'd become harder to ignore. The champagne bar was buzzing, clusters of people sipping and laughing, clinking flutes like they'd all won something. I hovered nearby, staying just outside their conversational circles. That's when a man, mid-50s, navy suit, tan from some golf course I'd never afford, waved his empty glass toward me without looking. "Hey, could I get another?" he said, like I was holding a tray. I blinked. For a split second, I wasn't sure he was talking to me. I looked behind me. No servers. "I don't work here," I said flatly. He glanced up, startled but not embarrassed. "Oh," he chuckled, dismissive. "My mistake." No apology, no acknowledgement, just a smirk and a pivot back into his conversation. Behind him, a woman with over-curled blonde hair stifled a laugh. She leaned into another guest and whispered something I didn't catch, but I didn't need to. The punchline was me. I stepped back, gripping the stem of an untouched glass of water. I couldn't tell if I was hot from the room or from something else bubbling just under the surface. The lights dimmed then, shifting the energy in the room. The music softened. A hush fell as people turned toward the projection screen on the far wall. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice echoed through the speakers, "please enjoy a look back at the Pellman family through the years." I stayed near the back, my hands folded behind me, knuckles pressed into my palm. The first slide flickered on. Danessa as a toddler, smeared in chocolate. Danessa in a Halloween costume. Danessa at graduation. Then Agatha, surrounded by children, lifting a wineglass and a holiday toast. More cousins, more family reunions, vacations I was never invited to, birthdays I wasn't at, not one photo of me, not even a group shot where I was an elbow in the corner. And not a soul noticed. Everyone smiled, nodded, some teared up. To them, this was a tribute to their family. To me, it was a carefully edited story, a fiction where I didn't exist. I tried to think of the last time anyone had asked me for a photo. The summers I paid for their kids' camp? The Christmas I hosted when everyone else was traveling? Nothing. Just airbrushed silence. I couldn't stand there anymore. I stepped out through the nearest set of doors into the side hallway, quieter, cooler. A waiter passed by and I asked him for water. He nodded kindly and disappeared into the kitchen. Alone, I stood near an antique mirror hanging on the wall, the kind that made everything look slightly gold. I stared at my reflection. My face was calm, but my chest was tight. Eyes a little too shiny. You ever look at yourself and feel like you're standing next to your own body, watching it try to keep it together? That was me. The hallway echoed with laughter from inside. The wedding wasn't mine to ruin. I'd keep telling myself that. Then I heard someone behind me. "You're not in the slideshow because you scare them," a voice said quietly. "You remind them who they used to be." I turned. It was a woman holding a clipboard, late 30s, sharp eyes, not unkind. She didn't wait for a response, just nodded once, like she knew everything, and walked away toward the kitchen. I watched her disappear down the hallway, clipboard tucked under one arm, stride confident like someone used to moving between people who forget to see her. I stood there for another beat, then checked my watch. The room had gone quiet again. Time to return before my absence was noticed, and twisted into something it wasn't. Back inside, the lights had come up. A few servers were circulating with canapes and prosecco, and guests were beginning to settle into their designated seats. I made my way back to my assigned table, careful to avoid any eye contact. The same lonely chair beside the kitchen, the same hum of staff conversations bleeding through the swinging doors. But now I was bracing for something more. I reached into my purse and felt the folded note card again. The speech. Months ago, Danessa told me she wanted me to speak. Just a few words after the slideshow, something heartfelt. I stayed up late writing it, scratched it out, rewrote it. I wanted it to be just right, not too personal, but not too polished either. Something that sounded like me. The real me. The MC stepped up to the microphone and tapped it twice, clearing his throat. He wore a forced smile, the kind you see on people who don't actually know the bride or groom, but get paid to pretend they do. All right, folks, let's keep the joy rolling. We've made a few quick adjustments to the schedule. Instead of additional remarks, we're heading straight to the groom's toast. There it was. The air didn't shift. The crowd didn't stir. No one looked surprised. But my name? It wasn't called, not even acknowledged. I scanned the front tables. Danessa was leaning into one of the groomsmen, laughing at something he'd said, a hand gently resting on her collarbone, like a pearl was about to fall from it. Her wineglass glistened in the light, full, untouched. She didn't even glance in my direction. I sat very still, hands folded in my lap. That moment you realize a door you thought was cracked open was actually locked from the inside. That's what it felt like. I had memorized every line, timed each pause, picked a neutral but meaningful closing. And now it didn't matter. No explanation, no apology. Just gone. Like I never existed in the outline at all. I told myself not to react, not here, not like this. I wasn't going to give anyone the satisfaction of calling me dramatic or bitter or jealous, the words families love to use when they've pushed someone to the edge and are waiting to see if you'll jump or just disappear. Instead, I breathed. You'd think I'd be used to this kind of thing by now, promises that dissolve as soon as they're inconvenient. But it still stung, because I had dared to hope, even a little. The lights dimmed again slightly for the groom's speech. I clapped politely at the opening joke. He was charming, polished. Every word he said had been rehearsed. The room drank in his voice like gospel. I didn't hear a single word of it. My attention shifted back to my purse. I reached in and felt the folded napkin that someone had quietly left on my table while I was gone. At first, I thought it was just another discarded linen, but when I opened it, my breath caught. Inside was the note card. The speech I had left backstage. My handwriting, perfectly preserved. At the bottom, in neat ink, just in case you still want to say it someday. R. I looked across the room toward the serving station, and there she was again. Clipboard woman. She didn't say anything, just nodded once before disappearing through the kitchen door. I held the card tightly, not to crumple it, but to feel its edges. Danessa once told me, "You've earned your moment." I believed her. That was the mistake. Not because I needed the spotlight, but because she made it sound like it would cost her nothing to give it. I slipped the note back into my purse. Let them pretend I had nothing to say. I'd find another place to speak. The room hadn't grown quieter, only my tolerance for it had. I tucked the folded note back into my purse and stood up. I didn't head straight for the ballroom again. Instead, I took the long route down the hall, passing the catering station, letting the familiar scent of roasted rosemary and charred lemons distract me. A few servers nodded politely as I passed. They knew who I was. Maybe not by name, but they knew. By the time I looped back to the garden terrace, the photo session was starting. Guests were being corralled into neat lines by a woman with a headset and the photographer's assistant, both issuing instructions with smiles that were just thin enough to feel like warnings. The wedding party had gathered at the center, with Danessa radiant in her pale lilac gown, flanked by in-laws, cousins, and people who treated her like royalty. I took a step forward toward the edge of the group. "Hey, Lenora," Danessa said lightly, sidling up to me with a small plate of hors d'oeuvres. Her voice was low, syrupy. "Just try not to stir things up, okay? This day's been a lot of work. Let's not make it complicated." My response came faster than I expected. "You think I don't know how to behave?" She smiled wider, like that made me look foolish. "It's not that. It's just, you know how certain moments aren't meant for everyone to speak." My jaw tightened. And yet, I've held this family together more times than anyone in that lineup. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just walked away, back into the fold. The photographer's voice broke in. "All right, let's get immediate family up here. Bride's parents, siblings, children if any. Quickly now, let's keep the light." I moved again, almost by instinct. But before I could get within 10 feet of the white runner, one of the younger staff stepped into my path. "Sorry, ma'am, the photographers asked for core family only right now. We'll have a larger group shot later." The way he said ma'am, so polished, so apologetic. It wasn't meant to hurt, but it landed like a slap. I could see Danessa watching from the side. She didn't intervene, didn't wave me over. She just smoothed the fabric at her hip and angled her body toward the camera. Next to her, Agatha sipped her champagne, her lips curved into something far too satisfied for the occasion. So I backed off. Again. I stood under a tree near the far edge of the terrace, just out of the camera's reach. They posed. They laughed. They rearranged themselves into different formations, like the pieces of a puzzle I had never been part of. I watched the back of my sister's head as the shutter clicked. I couldn't remember the last time she'd looked at me without calculation in her eyes. Maybe it was childhood. Maybe even then, it wasn't real. The photographer motioned to change groups. I started to walk away, thinking I'd slip back inside. But then I noticed something. Through the arched window leading into the ballroom, I could see my table again. Or at least, I could see where it had been. Now, a row of stacked silver carts blocked the view. My chair had been pushed back, half turned toward the wall, an empty space marked by the absence of presence. It struck me, not just as literal, but as a metaphor too perfect to ignore. They were covering me, erasing me, first from speeches, then from photos, now from the very room. And all of it without ever raising their voice. No confrontation, no accusation, just absence. Quiet, strategic absence. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I stood there, hands by my side, breathing in the scent of cut grass and chilled champagne as if that was enough to ground me. Rowan appeared beside me again. I hadn't seen her coming. She didn't look at me at first, just observed the group being repositioned for another round of candid family joy. Then, softly, almost conversationally, she said, "Even shadows leave a mark. You just haven't cast yours yet." That time, I looked at her. I didn't smile, but I didn't look away either. After Rowan's words, I didn't go back to my seat right away. Instead, I lingered outside for a moment, hands in my pockets, watching the breeze rustle the white linen streamers tied to the archway. Her comment still echoed in my head, not because it was profound, but because it was true. I'd been quiet for so long, I almost forgot I had a voice. Inside the ballroom, things had shifted again. The slideshow was over, and people had spilled back into conversation and champagne. Someone was already announcing the next segment, a gift presentation before the couple's toast. I walked in just as the crowd began to drift toward the tables lining the far wall, stacked with elaborately wrapped boxes, envelopes, and framed art. That's where I saw it. A framed oil painting, custom, delicate, exactly the one I had commissioned weeks ago after finding the artist through a former patient who did gallery work in Savannah. The colors, the soft touches of metallic ink, the hidden initials at the corner. It was unmistakable. I had chosen every inch of it, paid for it, even hand-wrote the message on the back. "For the future you're building together, may it never erase where you came from." But I wasn't standing near it. Agatha was. She held court, one hand resting lightly on the top edge of the frame, the other gesturing toward the audience of guests who'd gathered to admire it. "Our little family heirloom contribution," she said with practiced grace. Danessa and I thought it was the perfect touch. There it was. Just like that, it belonged to them. A few people clapped politely. Others leaned in to get a better look. I stepped closer, looked for the card that should have been tucked beneath the frame, found it. From the Pellmans, with pride. No mention of me, no mention of the artist, no trace of the truth. I felt a burn behind my eyes. Not tears, something else. Anger, maybe. Disgust. Familiarity. Danessa was nearby, laughing with someone from the groom's family, as if this was all just effortless. I approached her slowly, deliberately. You knew I commissioned that piece, I said, my voice low but steady. I have the emails, the receipt. The message I wrote is still on the back. Danessa turned toward me, unbothered. She didn't even blink. Lenora, please, not today. Not today, I repeated. Of course not, because today is for the version of events that flatters you best. She tilted her head. I didn't think it mattered. You said you didn't want attention. No, I corrected her. I said I didn't need a spotlight. That's not the same as giving you credit for something you didn't do. She offered a placid smile. It's a wedding, Lenora. Do you really want to do this here? I took a step back, not out of retreat, but recalibration. That's the thing about people like you, I said calmly. You mistake silence for surrender, but just because I haven't shouted doesn't mean I haven't been watching. Her mouth parted, just for a second. That was enough. I turned away, not needing her response. Not anymore. As I made my way toward the opposite end of the gift table, a woman I hadn't seen before, a guest from the groom's side, mid-50s, elegant in a dark green dress, touched my elbow gently. That was yours, wasn't it? She asked. I hesitated, not sure if she was being kind or setting up for something else. The way you looked at it, she continued. I've worn that look before, years ago, created something beautiful, handed it over, then watched someone else accept the applause. I didn't answer, didn't need to. My advice, she said, her voice soft but clear. Take credit, even if it makes people uncomfortable, especially then. People like her, they've been comfortable too long. I nodded once, not in agreement, but in understanding. She patted my hand. Just don't wait for permission. I stayed there a moment longer, watching the light catch the painting's glass. No one was looking at me. They rarely did. But I wasn't there to be looked at anymore. I was there to see clearly. I turned back toward the ballroom, not to escape, but to observe. To decide. Not at the guests. Not at Danessa. At the stage. I didn't head straight to the stage. I needed a pause. Not to retreat, just to reset. I circled the outer edge of the ballroom, weaving through guests who had no idea a storm was building 2 feet from their cocktails. As I neared the side hallway, I spotted Danessa. She was standing near the dessert display, surrounded by 2 bridesmaids and Agatha, who looked like she was born in heels and disdain. Before I could change course, Danessa spotted me and waved me over with a tight, purposeful smile. There you are, she said brightly, then dipped her tone just low enough to sound polite in front of others, but commanding underneath. Could you ask the staff to bring out the second cake stand? It's not on the table yet, and the pastry chef is running behind. I blinked. Did you check with the planner? You're better at finding things, she said, not quite a compliment. Agatha, standing a few feet back, chimed in like a closing gavel. You always were good with the small stuff, Lenora. Quick hands, detail-oriented. I stood there for a second too long, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what they were doing. My jaw stayed still, my feet didn't. I nodded once and turned away. I didn't go toward the pastry station. I walked straight into the kitchen corridor, letting the din of the party fade behind me. Cool air kissed my face as I passed racks of wine glasses and half-stacked trays. Staff bustled around, focused and fast-moving, none of them bothering me. In the back hallway, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. A clipboard hanging beside the catering schedule. On it was a mock-up of the event layout, hand-drawn floral notes along the margin, tiny sketches of arch details and ribbon placements. My handwriting. It was the same design I had drawn up a year ago when Danessa asked if I could throw together some ideas for her engagement party. She never used them, she claimed, said she'd hired someone else. Yet here they were, my scribbles, my vision, now executed down to the exact shade of eucalyptus in the floral arch. I stepped closer. My notes had even been highlighted, erased, repurposed, then passed off as someone else's vision. Voices echoed from the rear door. Two young men entered, one of them pausing to snap a photo beneath the arch. "Dude, this is next level. Danessa's got serious taste," one of them said, tilting the camera up. "She must have hired a killer designer." My fist clenched around the edge of the clipboard, but I didn't speak. Not yet. I turned back, slower this time, and walked toward the kitchen exit. Rowan was waiting near the threshold, arms crossed, clipboard hugged to her chest. She raised an eyebrow without a word. "They want the second cake stand," I said flatly. "You gonna fetch it?" she asked. I looked down the hallway, then back at her. "No?" Rowan studied me. Then she stepped forward and spoke in a quieter tone. "If you walk back in there with nothing, they'll say you forgot, or that you didn't care enough to help." "Good," I said, voice steady. "Let them." She nodded slightly. Then she pulled something from behind her clipboard, a slim folder with 3 sheets inside. "Design layouts," she said. "The originals, yours, dated, with your name." I stared at it, then back at her. "You kept them?" Rowan shrugged. "Some people try to erase what they didn't build. Some of us like to keep proof." I took the folder but didn't open it. Not yet. I stepped into the light of the hallway again, the noise of the ballroom returning like static. My heels hit the wood floors with more clarity now, like they were meant to be heard. Every time they tried to reassign me, reduce me, reshape the narrative, I'd complied. Not anymore. If they kept shoving me toward the back, they couldn't be surprised when I flipped the breakers. Let them have their spotlight. I was already walking toward the power source. I didn't hesitate. My hands steadied themselves as if they already knew what came next. I walked past the linen-covered tables, past the guests still laughing with flutes of champagne clinking in their hands, and stepped into the thick of the ballroom like I belonged there. The lights had shifted slightly, softening for the reception portion. Somewhere behind me, a string quartet had started playing a slower arrangement of a Coldplay song, elegant and entirely forgettable. I made my way past the bar, weaving through clusters of guests catching up, exchanging pleasantries, gossiping about people just a few feet away. That's when I heard it. Agatha's voice, clear and sweet, like syrup masking vinegar. "It's noble, really," she said to a circle of women perched near the velvet chaise. "How the family still includes her. You know, considering the early years. No degree, that little apartment. We all do what we can." They laughed, of course. Not the loud kind. Just enough to be felt. Another woman leaned in, her pearls swinging. "She's the charity aunt. Every family's got one." I didn't stop. I didn't even turn my head. But my fingers tightened around the clutch I carried. A slow burn rose through my spine. I kept walking. This wasn't new, just more public. Halfway to the back wall, I passed a young guest, someone I didn't recognize. She was taking a photo of the hanging lights. Her eyes flitted over to me as I passed. "Love that you're going for the vintage look," she said, smiling in that smug, backhanded way some young women master too early. I paused. "I'm not," I said without blinking. "But I suppose that's your way of calling something old without calling it valuable." She blinked. Didn't respond. Behind her, I noticed Rowan watching from the side of the room near the AV table. She didn't speak, just made a quick note on a paper in her hand. She'd seen it all. I made my way toward the buffet. I wasn't hungry, but standing still made me feel like a target. Then another voice. Danessa's this time. Louder than she needed to be. "We've all helped her through the years," she said to a man near the wine bar. "She just has a hard time showing gratitude." It wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the room. That's when I stopped walking. I turned. Danessa noticed. Her mouth tightened slightly. Just a flicker, like she hadn't expected me to hear it, or maybe didn't expect me to care. I walked back toward her, not rushing. When I reached her, I stood just a few feet away. Enough to command attention, but not to raise alarm. "You're right," I said, calm and clear. "I do have a hard time being grateful, especially when people confuse pity for generosity." Danessa blinked. But I didn't give her room to speak. I helped build this day, I continued. That painting, that arch, that speech you cut, that florist you still owe. I was there, but you kept pretending I wasn't. You built a stage on silence and expected me to keep holding it up. Agatha had turned to face us by now, her lips parted in a tight, toothless smile. We all have our roles, Lenora, she said, with the condescension of a woman who's never been questioned. Not everyone's meant for center stage. I'm not asking for center stage, I replied, but I won't stay in the shadows just to keep you comfortable. I didn't wait for either of them to speak. I turned, walked past the crowded tables, and found the one empty seat near the far end of the ballroom. Beneath the chandeliers I had suggested 6 months ago, the ones Danessa insisted were too much, before she found a way to claim the idea as her own. I sat, straightened my back, and looked straight ahead. A few people were watching now, not many, but enough. Rowan approached, walking with purpose. She didn't sit, just placed a folded slip of paper in front of me. They forgot whose name is on the paperwork, she said under her breath. You ready to remind them? I didn't just nod. I stood up. My legs moved before doubt had a chance to catch up. I walked past tables that moments ago had felt like battlegrounds, but now they were just props. The music still floated through the room, cheerful, oblivious. Glasses clinked, silverware tapped. No one saw it coming. As I stepped into the rear lounge, I slipped into the seat nearest the window. I needed a minute, not to reconsider, but to breathe before I set the whole thing in motion. The sunlight through the tall panes cut across the floor, casting clean, straight lines. Orderly, undeniable. I pulled my phone from my purse. One buzz vibrated as I unlocked it. A notification from 3 years ago, a scheduled voicemail. I had forgotten I'd saved it, back when I still believed voices could carry you through hard things. I pressed play. My father's voice, scratchy but strong, filled the speaker. If you ever feel invisible, he said, remember, you were the glue when everyone else cracked. My throat tightened, but the tears stayed back. Not from numbness, clarity. I had been the patchwork, the filler, the one who kept things moving behind the scenes. But the room had never once turned to say, she did that. They built this day over me, I whispered. But I'm still here, under it all. The call ended. I tucked the phone back in my bag and scrolled through my contacts. It didn't take long to find Dorian Kepler, the venue manager, a man who returned calls promptly and kept good records, because I chose him for that reason. I hit call. Kepler speaking. Dorian, I said, voice level. It's Lenora Shipman. Ah, Ms. Shipman. Everything all right with the event? Yes. I just need to confirm something. The contract for today. Whose name is it under? He didn't hesitate. Yours. You made the reservation, paid the deposit, and signed the terms. Everything's in your name. Thank you, I said, sitting up straighter. I'd like to invoke the cancellation clause. Effective immediately. A pause. Understood, he said, calmly but firmly. Would you like me to make the announcement, or shall I defer to you? I want them to hear it from someone who doesn't blink. I'll handle it. We hung up. I stood again, collected my folder, and returned through the side entrance, this time walking straight into the center of the ballroom. The crowd had shifted into a lull, that late afternoon stillness when guests start to relax too much. Agatha stood near the head table, swirling her drink like nothing could touch her. Danessa was mid-conversation, laughing, her fingers resting lightly on the groom's lapel. Dorian stepped to the front, microphone in hand. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't ask for attention. He just spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that the event will be discontinued effective immediately. The signatory on the contract has chosen to terminate the rental and service agreement. Staff has been instructed to halt all food, drink, and music services within the next 10 minutes. Murmurs turned into a wave of gasps and murmuring. Faces turned, mouths dropped open. Agatha's expression soured, slow and twitching. Danessa looked as if someone had slapped her mid-sentence. "What is this?" she barked, stepping toward Dorian. "You can't just— This is a private event." Dorian glanced at me. I met his eyes. That was his cue. "I'm afraid Ms. Shipman, your sister, is the legal holder of this reservation. Her authorization supersedes any informal arrangement." I stepped forward, not needing the mic. "You're shocked," I said quietly, but loud enough. "I get it. After all, you've spent the whole day pretending I wasn't in the room, pretending this wasn't my handwriting on the plans, my name on the bills, my time, my silence. But I was the one who held this up while you stood on it." Danessa's face flushed. "Lenora, you're ruining everything." "No," I said, steady. "I'm ending it. There's a difference." "You can't walk away from family like this," Agatha snapped. "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm letting go. There's a difference there, too." The room didn't fall silent, but it changed. Conversations died mid-word. Heads turned not out of curiosity anymore, but out of recognition. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder Rowan had handed me earlier. I crossed the floor and handed it to her without fanfare. "You might want to keep this," I said. "Someone's going to try to rewrite how this ended." She nodded once, tucked the folder beneath her arm. Then I left. No one followed. No one stopped me. There was no spotlight, no grand music swell, just quiet, the kind that settles in when the noise you've tolerated your whole life finally stops. Outside, the sun had begun to fall just behind the treetops. Warm air wrapped around me, soft and neutral. Then a buzz in my hand. A text. From Danessa. "You're no longer my sister." I stared at it, typed one sentence back, then hovered over send, but I didn't press it. Some goodbyes don't need punctuation, just distance. I slid the phone into my bag without deleting the message. There was no need. It had said what it needed to, and so had my silence. I didn't look back at the building behind me as I stepped off the property. The sun dipped a little lower, and the breeze carried the faint scent of hydrangeas and pine mulch from the landscaping, details I'd once cared about too much. 3 weeks passed. They didn't call. I didn't reach out. The silence between us stretched into something solid, like a wall that had been there for years, only now we were both willing to admit it. Charleston had its way of buzzing with stories, and mine was no exception. In grocery lines and coffee shops, people lowered their voices when I walked by. Some called it a breakdown, others, a power play. But mostly, they just whispered. Danessa unfollowed me on everything within 2 days. I wasn't surprised. She liked to curate her world. Only highlight reels, never the bloopers. From what I heard through a friend of a friend, Agatha had hired someone to do reputation cleanup. Apparently, word had gotten out about the cancellation and the contract, and now she wanted to clarify the facts. Let her. I still showed up to work each morning at the public health clinic in North Charleston, the same office I'd held for 7 years, same chipped desk, same coffee-stained mug. Nobody there asked what happened at the wedding. They just handed me case files and kept the day moving. And honestly, that was enough. One Tuesday afternoon, Rowan stopped by. She didn't knock, just tapped the doorframe and held up a plain manila envelope. "I figured you might want this," she said, placing it on my desk. "Everything's in here. Your emails, payment receipts, the signed agreement, just in case someone tries to twist it later." I looked at it for a second, then at her. "Thanks," I said. "You want me to go on record?" "I will." I shook my head. "No need." Rowan stood there for a beat, then said, "You sure? People forget fast, especially when the story doesn't benefit them." "I don't need them to remember," I replied. "I just need to stop justifying myself." She gave me a slight smile. "Fair enough." After she left, I didn't open the envelope. I placed it in the back of the bottom drawer and slid it shut. A few days later, I found myself reading over a letter I had written by hand. It had taken me hours, scratching out lines, rewriting parts. I didn't even know if I'd send it when I began. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was just honest. I told Danessa the truth, that I loved her once without condition, that I carried too much for too long, and that I finally realized some bonds only work when both people pull. I folded it, walked it to the mailbox, then paused, and instead of sliding it inside, I walked it back home, tore it clean down the middle, and dropped the pieces in the trash. Some bridges don't burn, they just fall apart from neglect. And I didn't need to cross this one again. The next Monday, we welcomed a new intern to the clinic. Maya. Bright-eyed, over-prepared, and still believing she could change the world in one grant cycle. She shadowed me most of the morning, and by lunchtime, she asked, "How do you handle it when someone at work tries to take credit for what you've done?" I smiled, not out of bitterness, but familiarity. "Well," I said, "you've got options. You can stay quiet if it's not worth it. Or you can speak up when you're ready, but either way, keep records, document everything." She nodded. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. "You're tougher than you look," she said. "Most women are," I replied. That afternoon, I stayed late to finish a report. The building had mostly emptied out, and I sat at my desk, watching the light fade through the blinds. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't bitter. I was just steady. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to defend my presence in a room. I didn't have to explain how I got here, or who built the platform I stood on. I was never the loudest voice, but I was the one who drew the blueprint. And now, they knew whose signature was at the bottom. Before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with something personal. If this story meant anything at all, I hope it reminded you of this. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't need a title to hold value. And you certainly don't need permission to take up space in a world that keeps trying to shrink you. For too long, I let other people define my worth. By what I wore, where I sat, and what they said about me when they thought I wasn't listening. But strength doesn't always come in a roar. Sometimes, it's in the quiet, unwavering choice to walk away, without looking back. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've been the one who held everything together and got none of the credit, just know you're not alone. And your story still matters, even if they never say your name. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been written out of someone else's narrative? How did you reclaim your voice? Or are you still finding it? I'd love to hear from you. If this video spoke to you, if it touched something real in your heart, drop a 1 in the comments, or just tell me where you're watching from. Let's build a space where stories like ours are seen, not silenced. And if this one didn't land for you, I respect that too. Tell me why. I'm listening. If you're new here and this kind of storytelling resonates with you, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story. Because sometimes healing begins not in being heard by everyone, but by being understood by just one person. And maybe, just maybe, that person is you.